welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and this is going to be part number 3 of the Nemesis playthrough here on the channel. Really excited to get going into this one to see how things pan out. In the last episode, luck was certainly on my side, but I'm sure that's about to run out. There were a couple things that were noted inside the last video that I want to address for corrections. Thankfully, both of them I believe we can actually address as part of this video and actually ensure that things are balanced. So without further ado, let's go over those two things and then we'll move right into the playthrough. So you guys likely remember from the last video when I was at the nest with the medic, I moved to the emergency room, flipped over the tile, placed down the token, set the search amount, and then completely forgot to roll for noise. Yes, and you guys caught it, and I'm really glad you did. I was being sneaky. No, I was not actually purposely trying to miss that, but somehow I managed to, and I moved into the laboratory. But the good news is I have to go back through the emergency room at some point. So on the first attempt to move into the emergency room, no matter what, that very first movement in, depending on whether I move in there as a basic action and just move in loudly and roll for noise, or if I choose to carefully move in and place the noise where I want, that will happen as normal. But then I'm going to make a noise roll for a second time right afterwards to make up for the roll I should have done earlier, and hopefully that will balance things out, so it's going to be double the fun for you guys. The next correction is a real easy one, and it happened to do with the intruder development bag step, where I went ahead and I pulled out this one right here. However, what I said incorrectly at the time was that was a larva, which it was not. This is a creeper. It is a little bit different, but for some reason I looked at it just wrong. This right here is a larva, that's a creeper. I pulled a creeper out of the bag, and when you do so, you have to then go ahead and discard this particular token, and instead of placing an adult token like I did at the time into the bag, you actually place a breeder token into the bag. So thankfully that was done at the end of the video and caught, so we're able to correct the bag before any pulls happen, so absolutely no gameplay impact, but a very good catch. This final correction is a great one, and I'm really glad it was caught as well, because there will be no gameplay impact because we can resolve it. But this ER card, I used it twice in the last video, and I used it for the bottom portion of the card. Now you'd look at this and think, well, it states that this character draws 3 action cards to their hand, at least right off the cuff. But if you read from the very top, you'll notice that some important instructions at the very top are also gelled in with the first option, making it kind of seem like the first option is the one that you need to actually spend ammo from the needle gun in order to do, when really in fact it's for both. So I glazed over that and I took advantage of this twice in the last video, so because of that I'm going to be going ahead and removing the ammo I have on the needle gun. What I'm going to be looking for now, seeing as the needle gun is a very interesting item, is that the fact that I need to find chemicals in order to reload this thing. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead with part number 3. The player marker is going to move from the medic over to the bounty hunter, as we ended off the last video right after we drew up to 5 cards each. So the bounty hunter, as we left him off in the last video, is in engine room number 1. He knows that that engine is broken, it's damaged, it's not working properly, and he did actually draw a card that can help him with just that. He's got 2 actions to spend. The first one's going to be to use this repair card as it states on the card. In the very bottom here it says, repair, break the engine in the engine room you're in. We're going to definitely be repairing it, and as you can see, it's going to cost an additional card on top of this one as well. So I'm also going to discard this rest card, as we have no reason to be resting right now. So as you can see, the one at the back is the damaged one, the one that was showing. We are now going to go ahead and put the working one on top, and we're going to place them back down on the board. So that's one of the 2 engines we need to know that are working in order to have this Nemesis ship be a part of our potential success. Now we always have that escape pod as an alternative to this whole situation, but it's good to know we can work towards actually surviving in hibernation on the ship itself. Action number 1 complete. Bounty Hunter successfully fixed up the engines, and now we need to do our second action. You can see there's noise markers all over the place here. I'm just going to move right into the fire control system. I don't want to burn a whole bunch of cards. I could do a careful movement because there is one more spot to place one, but as you can see later on, it's kind of interesting. But if I was in the fire control system after a careful move and I placed the noise marker here, and I'm here later on, if I wanted to move to the nest and there's a noise marker in all the corridors, you can no longer carefully move. Obviously at that point you're going to make noise and it's going to cause a problem. The problem I don't want to run into is being in the nest when that problem happens. So I'd rather it happen over here. So I'm very happy to just pay the 1 cost to actually go ahead and do a regular movement, roll the die, and hopefully it'll actually trigger the intruder and we can actually deal with it. We'll see how this goes. So I'm going to use this card right here to do a basic movement. We're going to go ahead and move from this location to here, and we're going to roll the noise die. So let's see how this pans out. We got the only corridor that doesn't have a noise marker. This is actually quite hilarious and terrifying all at the same time, because exactly what I just talked about is probably going to happen. I'm getting into a situation where I could put myself in a nest that then has an intruder show up that I'm going to have to deal with later on when I potentially could have a queen come from the intruder bag and show up on the nest. It could just become a gong show. So what I'm going to do maybe with my bounty hunter is actually move backwards in the future to avoid that from happening, or maybe I can actually have the medic, with the medic's movement out to the emergency room, somehow trigger an intruder that will then get rid of this noise token, allowing me to carefully move to the nest and get the heck out of there before things go crazy. At this point, we've done both actions for my bounty hunter. Let's hope the medic can clear some stuff up to give my bounty hunter some options. Fingers crossed. So the medic's turn is up next, and as I mentioned, I'm going to be moving out of the laboratory into the emergency room. I'm going to be paying 1 card here to do a basic action of movement, discarding that card, and we're going to head over here to the emergency room. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be doing 2 noise rolls here. Now, I could have carefully moved here if I wanted to, but I actually want to try and trigger something here. So we're going to go ahead and roll the die and see if we can make that happen. Based on how things have been going, I'm really good at placing noise markers in every spot possible without actually triggering any intruders. We'll see if that continues. If it does, I need to take pictures of this board for the future to remind myself that it'll never happen again. Here we go. We got ourselves a 2. That is going to be an automatic trigger right there, and it literally did exactly what I was hoping it would do. So that is going to trigger this one right here. It disappears, and yes, for the first time in the game, we have an intruder. So all noise markers in the corridors connected to the emergency room have been removed at this point. If there was a blue technical corridor connected to the emergency room, which there is not, then the blue technical corridor noise marker, this one right here, would be removed. So in other words, right now the only areas are these ones connecting to the emergency room. If this had have happened when I was standing in the laboratory, we've got a red technical corridor and a blue one. So at that point, you'd be clearing these 2 corridors and then both of the technical corridors. So it doesn't matter whether it's a regular corridor or a technical corridor, you're clearing all of those when you actually trigger an encounter. The next thing you do when you trigger an encounter is something real fun. You're going to dive your hand into the intruder bag and you're going to hope that you pull out a blank. There is a blank in there, so I'm hoping I pull it. But I can tell you there's a whole lot of stuff in there right now because I haven't pulled much out. So chances are pretty slim. So let's see what happens. First one out of the bag is an adult. So an adult has joined us in the emergency room. Quite ironic, right? We're probably going to need an emergency after the thrashing we're about to get. You can see here it was the adult token as I showed you a clip ago. We're going to be taking this token. We'll just place it on the board here. If this particular creature happens to go back into the vents, disappear on us, which can happen, it goes back into the bag. The token is tied to the actual miniature on the board. That's important to remember. Now, I might take that token off the game board as I go along just to decrease the clutter side of things, but you can also place this under the miniature. There's other ways to do this. So currently we do have an adult in the room, but there's another thing to mention on the bottom side of this token that's very important to check, and that is a surprise attack. This one has a surprise attack value of a 3. So at this point, we need to check the bounty, or sorry, not the bounty hunter, but the medic's current hand to see whether a surprise attack happens. So a surprise attack is determined by how many cards you have in your hand against the token value. And if it's equal, you're going to be completely fine. If you have more cards than the number on the token, you're completely fine. So in this case, I have 4, the number was 3. I'm not going to be sneak attacked. If I had 2 cards in hand, or 1 for example, then a sneak attack would occur. We'll likely see one at some point during the playthrough. Now, I don't want to forget about what I promised you guys, and that was an additional noise roll for the miss I made in the last video, which I'm going to do right now. Remember, you wouldn't make a noise roll again typically at this very point. I'm doing this strictly only to correct the fact that I didn't do it the first time through. So this will put a noise marker in one of these 4 corridors and won't trigger anything, at least not yet. So let's go ahead and roll and find out where it lands. The 1. So it's actually going to be on the side I probably plan on passing through, which is really unfortunate. It's over here. So second action time here with the medic. Do I really want to be in this room fighting this intruder? Now, when I'm in a room with an intruder, I'm considered to be in combat with it. I only have 2 options. I can actually fight this thing. I could do so with a gun or a weapon if I had one. My needle gun currently is empty anyway, so we're not going to talk about any type of use of any type of weaponry. However, I can use my fists, which isn't exactly the most efficient way to fight an alien and will likely resolve in a situation where you do some damage potentially, but also in some cases, if not most, take an injury, which makes sense thematically that if you go toe-to-toe with an alien, you're not really built to put a lot of damage onto them as they will back to you. So that's quite a big risk. The other thing you can do, and you need to know when to do this, is run. And running is actually not a bad thing inside of Nemesis. The only problem with running, though, is you still have to suffer an intruder attack just to be able to run. And then, on top of it, once you get to whichever room you're going to, you're then going to go ahead and resolve a noise roll as you normally would, unless you actually retreated to a room with another character or another intruder. Again, remember the rule I talked about in the last video. Anytime you move into a room with another character or an intruder, you don't perform a noise roll. So in this case, I could put myself in that room up to the north after I take an attack, only to then roll noise, land a 1, and trigger another intruder. You can see how this can spiral out of control pretty fast. But let's not dwell on the negative. We're going to go ahead and grab an intruder attack card, and the key we're really hoping to not see on it is an adult icon. If we see the adult icon, then we have to resolve the ability on the card, which is likely going to result in us taking some serious pain as we try to escape this intruder. If there isn't an adult icon, then the attack the intruder does against us misses on our way as we try to escape out. So I'm going to go ahead and discard this card right here in order to do that movement, because actually escaping is considered a regular movement, hence the reason you'll need to do a noise roll if you land into a room without a character or an intruder. But let's now flip that card on the intruder attack and see what happens. As you can see on the card in front of me, we have 3 icons right in the middle. We have the adult icon, we have the breeder icon, and the queen icon. So unfortunately, yes, this intruder does attack us right now with a claw attack across the medic on her way out, trying to escape. The really bad thing about this is that the character is going to suffer 2 light wounds and gets a contamination card because of it. Well, that certainly didn't go to plan, did it? So what we're going to have here is a wound, and actually 2 of them hitting the medic. So basically you take a status marker, and the first position of the top of this track says 1 light wound. We don't just take 1 though, we actually take 2 light wounds, so we shift it down. If we already had 1 light wound and we took 2, so say this marker was already on here from previous and we just took another 2, we would actually shift this marker all the way down to the serious wound card. We'd take this marker off the board and we would take a serious wound card. We really don't want those. Those are not so good. And I'll talk more about how that can really affect your life expectancy as we go on later on when we get into into those situations. But as of right now, let's just focus on what we're dealing with currently, which is just a hit for 1 light wound and the second hit for 2 light wounds, putting us very close to the serious wound. So we're going to want to try to find some things on Nemesis somewhere to try to bandage us up, try to deal with these wounds before they become a big time problem. So besides the light wounds, the claw attack from the intruder also hits us with a contamination, and this contamination could potentially come up as an infection when we do the victory check at the very end of the game. As of right now, this card now lives in the medic's deck, but it doesn't go into the actions deck that's shuffled and ready to be drawn from or into her hand. It goes at the top of the discard pile. Eventually, once we run through the action cards deck and everything's in the discard and we need to shuffle to draw more cards up, then we're going to see this card shuffled into that deck and drawn eventually, which will then land in my hand. And at that point, it causes problems for me during gameplay, not only at the end of the game for the victory conditions check, but during gameplay, where it's going to start clogging up the amount of decent cards in my hand. Because remember, we always draw up to 5 at the start of a new player phase. If you have your contamination card in your hand, you can't just discard it or get rid of it. It has to stay there. The only way to get rid of these types of cards is to use something like the medic currently has, like this surgery kit, for instance. And there's other cards and ways within the game we can try to ditch these cards. The fun part's trying to figure out when to do that exactly. Wait until the very last minute when you have multiple, or try to clean them up quickly so that you don't clog up your gameplay during each player phase. There's a lot of things to juggle when you become contaminated. As mentioned, the contamination card is going to sit right on top of the discard pile, and I'm really not looking forward to that thing cycling back up into my hand. Alright, so we've gone ahead and we've dealt with that surprise attack from the alien. I've escaped. I took a lot of damage. I got contaminated on the way out, but our medic is going to move as far away from that intruder as possible. As part of my second action, which was to escape the intruder rather than try to actually combat it or fight it, I used an action to move, and when I move into an unexplored room, I get to go ahead through the explored steps. So we're going to flip over that exploration token, check out the room, and we got to make a noise roll. So we have found a storage room on board the Nemesis. Here we can actually spend 2 in order to search at this location. As the exploration token notes, it has the availability to be searched twice, but it's also malfunctioning, so that's fun. Malfunctioning is definitely going to stop us from doing that room activity, at least until we can fix it. Plus, we now currently have 3 malfunction tokens on Nemesis in total. Now we're going to go ahead and roll for noise, and we're going to cross our fingers that it isn't a 1. I really don't want to trigger another intruder. What did we get? We got a 3. The noise marker landing in corridor number 3, way up there in the top right, is certainly an interesting spot to have it land, as I was planning to go around to engine 3. Now we got noise there. I do need to explore every tile, so I have to get to that other tile eventually. It might make sense to go there when I can. It's still just kind of, I could carefully move in and carefully move out, and then maybe go to engine room number 2, or have the bounty hunter go there and have the medic actually head left and head up to the front of the ship. We'll have to see how this all changes things, especially when I don't want the medic really in confrontation with this intruder on the board currently. So I'm going to be trying to get her as far away as possible. Now these are some seriously brutal decisions to make right now, especially with the bounty hunter with noise markers everywhere. The only thing he could do currently with the cards in his hand is he could literally, everything he's got prevents surprise attacks and helps him with combating these intruders, but he's not near enough to this intruder that just showed up to help the medic. And if he tries to get there, he's going to put himself in a nest area. He could carefully move there, but he'd have to ditch the 2 cards I've been holding onto the whole time, knowing full well I'm going to need them in the upcoming intruder attack. So if I did that, I'd be putting myself not only at the nest, which would be okay because I'd be on the move out, but I'd have to place, or I would place from careful movement, 1 noise marker here. I'd then be surrounded by noise, sitting inside the nest with the risk that the queen could eventually show up here during the intruder bag development phase, which would be absolutely terrible and throw this whole thing into a giant twist down spiral. So what we need to think about is whether we want to actually just have the bounty hunter sit, and I really don't like that. I don't like having him just kind of camp out, because if I carefully move later and then try to move out again later on, I'm burning like a whole hand almost just to get myself to say from here to here and then over to here to check this, and then maybe get into the engine room to try and fix it, that type of thing. But I think I might have to do that. I don't think I have too much of a choice. Plus, I don't mind the bounty hunter being at the back end of the ship where all the noise is, because I think he's the most capable of fighting these things off, whereas the medic, I kind of want to keep the medic away from these intruders because she's got so many good items. So what I'm going to try to do right now is just have the bounty hunter sit still. And I really don't like doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead with him, and I'm going to choose to pass at this point. Now I can discard any cards in my hand. This is something else that I may not have mentioned prior. If you're seeking cards out from your deck because you know you really want a specific card to do a certain thing, maybe you want a card that'll allow you to drop a door down to protect you or something along those lines, and you know it's in your deck, if you're fishing for cards, you are allowed at this point to go ahead and discard as many cards you want from your hand so that you can ensure you can draw fresh ones in the next player phase. So here's what I'm going to do in order to try to protect myself from what is likely to come in the future. I'm going to go ahead and use a card called Computer Skills. This card right here, as you can see, allows me to go ahead and drop a door. It states right on it for 0, so I don't have to add anything to this card. It says open or close one door in a corridor connected to the room you're in. So I'm going to go ahead right now and use this card by discarding it in order to drop a door right here on this position. You'll see this kind of shadowed block rectangular right there in every single corridor. That's where a door can be put, and those doors are going to slow those intruders down when they try to move. So we have sealed off that corridor, which is going to help us. However, the intruder can, when it makes its movement, attempt to break that thing down, and it will if it happens to move down that corridor, and then later it'll move through it. So it just, like I said, slows them down. But hey, that might be enough for me to get into that top right hand corner, check out that particular tile, and then get the heck out of there, leaving maybe engine number 2 for the bounty hunter to check out, seeing as he'll be kind of coming up that way anyway. All right, so I'm going to do something quite risky here. This could be really, really, really unwise. I'm going to go ahead and risk it. Even though I just sealed out an intruder, I'm going to do something that could potentially have an intruder drop on us, which would be really bad. But the odds are my favor that it won't happen. So sometimes you got to take those odds. So I'm going to go ahead. I have 2 cards left. One is a repair card and one is a search card. And yes, I'd be so tempted to go into engine room number 3 and repair it at some point. I won't be able to make it there and do that this entire player phase. But again, I just don't want to bury the medic that far in, so I'd rather have the bounty hunter go through his deck to get that card, which will come back around again, seeing as he just used it on engine number 1 soon enough. Probably by the time he gets to engine number 2, he'll have the card available. So I'm going with that strategy. So I'm going into a new room in the back right hand corner here. The problem is I'm going to move into it with regular movement, meaning I'm going to roll a die, and if I land a 3, that door means nothing because an intruder is going to show up in the room I'm standing in. But the odds of 1, 2, and 4 landing are much higher. There's other things on that die that could mess with me too, but you know what? You're going to take a risk every now and then. And I don't want to lose my search card. The other card, so again, I have 2 cards in my hand. I could have also discarded this to do the careful movement, but I like this search card. I want to be able to search because remember, I'm trying to find some chemicals for my needle gun. So I just really need to keep this card right now so I can refill that to give me something to prevent these intruders from having their way with me. So at this point, I've discarded 1. We're going to move from the storage area to that top right hand corner. And we have found way up in the back corner of the ship, the armory. And at the armory here, it is malfunctioning as well. So this will be our 4th malfunction marker on the ship. I've also set the room to 1. We can search there just once. It's malfunctioning, but in the armory on the tile, we can actually recharge our energy weapons there at a cost of 2. So that's good to know. Time for that noise roll, that one I was really looking forward to, the risky one. So we don't want to see any 3s on this roll. A 1. Okay, I can deal with that. That was actually the corridor that had the highest odds of landing. Just like that, we got a noise marker down, and that's gonna do it. So with the bounty hunter passing long ago, really it's just down to the medic going until she doesn't want to go anymore. I do have one card left in my hand here. I have a search card. I could actually go ahead right now and do a search. I'm inside of a room that would help me with some potential items that maybe could actually be used to fight some things off. So with the search card that I held onto, I'm going to go ahead and use it, seeing as I seem to be fairly safe at the moment. So we'll reduce the item counter in the room by 1. It's currently at 1, so it no longer will be searchable. And let's find out what 2 items are coming off the top of the deck. So the 2 options off the top of the deck here, we have a grenade. It's a one-time use only. Of course, once you throw a grenade, you're not going to get it back. And it states, choose one room with an intruder. The one you're in or a neighboring one, the chosen intruder suffers 2 injuries. That's actually really good compared to the Molotov cocktail I created, which does drop a fire marker in the space you're in and does actually give 1 injury or serious wound out. But in this particular case, the grenade actually does more injuries, which is really, really good for getting up to that track level so that it could potentially be killed off. So that could be good in tandem with the Molotov cocktail I have, or maybe even just separately. Below it says all of the beings in the targeted room, including you, suffer 1 injury, serious wound. Well, I'm not planning on hurting anybody else, so that's not going to be an issue. On the other side here, we got the comms key. It says if you're in a room with a computer, look at the objective card of one character with a signal marker on their character board. So that one's very specific to kind of the multiplayer side of things. So that's not really going to help me. So I'm definitely going with a grenade. And with that, the medic is going to pass, and we're now going to move into the event phase. All right, so the time track is on the move down to 11. Now we have the intruder attack step. Now there's no characters in a room with an intruder. If there's ever a character in the room, this is the point when the intruder would attack. It would go ahead and use an intruder attack card. If there's more than 2 characters in a room, it goes after whoever has the least amount of cards in hand. Next up, we have the fire damage step, but we have no fire on the map anywhere, so no issues there. We can move right to the event. So first off, at the very top of this card, we have some icons, and these relate to the adult, breeder, and queen. They're going to all be moving if they're on the game board down the track number 2. In this case, we do have an adult on the board in the emergency room, and the corridor number 2 will lead the adult to the nest. Well, that's pretty crazy, because it's almost feeling like the alien knew we closed the door on him, and he's not going to go down that trail. He's actually going to head down here closer to our bounty hunter. So this is good news for the medic, because the medic's a little bit more in the clear at this point and probably can careful move her way out of there and start heading up towards the front of the ship. But the bounty hunter could be in some serious trouble. Next up on the card, it states life support failure. Place a malfunction marker in each green room, then remove this event from the game and reshuffle the events deck, including the discard pile. So we have another one of those ones that's dragging cards from the discard pile back in. Now, the one thing to note is the fact we currently have 2 green tiles on the board. One's the emergency room. It's already malfunctioning. The only other room that's green, or tile that's green, that isn't malfunctioning is the laboratory, but now it is. So I'm getting a little bit concerned about how many malfunction markers are on the board now. We currently have 5. The good news is my characters are currently standing in 2 of the 5. So if I can make it a focus with my next hand of cards going to the next player phase to try to reduce those malfunction markers, it might be a wise decision, as it seems like the ship's not in the best situation in terms of its mechanics at the moment. All right, so now we're diving into the intruder bag development step. Let's see what comes out of this bag. Hopefully it's something not too bad. Famous last words. We got ourselves a larva. So a larva, as we know, turns into an adult, which is unfortunate for us, and goes into the intruder bag. All right, so let's go ahead and draw up to 5 cards. The bounty hunter currently has taking aim and sentinel. We're moving into the player phase. I'm going to drop 3 more cards. Again, I've been keeping these 2 knowing full well bad things were going to happen around him. I got Go Girl. This one says you can move Leica to a neighboring room or return her to the bounty hunter board. This actually could be a decent play. We'll have to see whether or not we can use our dog to our advantage here to help us out. Next up, we have Interruption. This is a good card to burn when playing in co-op mode solo. And then we got Search here. And Search is always good, but not necessarily when you have a ton of intruders wanting to take you down. All right, for the medic's draw up of 5 cards, we got Demolition, destroy one closed door in a corridor connected to the room you're in, or place a malfunction marker. And that doesn't sound like anything I really want to do, so it could be a good one to just spend for other things. A Search, We can't search in the room we're currently in, but we could search if we actually headed back to the storage room. So it could be useful. We got a rest. Ooh, scan all your contamination cards in your hand and remove all not infected cards. If any of the cards was infection, follow the infection procedure. So we might want to actually go down this road, seeing as, now hold on a second, it says scan all the contamination cards if in your hand. So you can notice there, you have to wait until that contamination card, which is in my discard pile right now, eventually gets into my deck, which then gets drawn here, and then eventually it's in my hand and I can actually do this. So I'd have to hold on to my rest for quite a while to make use of this. It might be worth it. I'll have to take a look. Next up, we got that ER card I talked about before. Again, you can see right there at the top it says spend 1 ammo. We don't have the ammo to spend for this one, so this is another card we'll be just burning at the moment, and then to do other basic or careful movement or just basic actions in general. And then we got field dressing. The first player marker is also going to move from the bounty hunter back to the medic. The first action for the medic is going to be to heal herself. She's got this field dressing card, which I have to discard another card with it, so I'm going to go ahead and ditch the ER one, seeing as I can't make use of it for its ability anyway. It states on the field dressing card, heal all light wounds or dress 1 serious wound of any one character in the room you're in. That includes the medic herself. Then draw a card if you're in a green room. I'm not in a green room, but I will take advantage of the fact I can get rid of all of my light wounds, preventing me from taking a potential serious wound down the road. So as you can see, being a medic certainly has its advantages in terms of being able to take care of yourself and others. For my second action with the medic, I'm simply going to go ahead and discard 2 cards from my hand so I can safely move or carefully move back to the storage room. I've got noise tokens in the 3rd corridor and the 1st corridor around the storage room, so I don't really want to make a noise roll. I'd rather place the noise where I'd like it. So I'm going to go ahead and discard these 2 cards from my hand, as I'm not planning on using them, although I wanted to use search in the storage room. I'll have to wait for that later. And in order to help out the bounty hunter, I'm actually going to place the noise ahead of me where I plan to go, which is up through this corridor over here, and I'll be able to make careful movement as I move along there so that I can avoid that noise from tripping me up. But I really want to try to leave some spots here for the bounty hunter to carefully move in around here once he gets down there without having to worry about too much noise building up, or have a little bit of freedom. So I'm doing that as a nice gesture. I definitely could have put that behind me. So that's going to be it for my 2 actions for the medic. The one thing you might have noticed I didn't do is I didn't repair the armory. That's because I don't have any cards that I drew up into my hand that could repair that malfunction marker. So unfortunately, I can't do anything about those particular markers right now, even with the cards I have item-wise in my hand. Nothing I have can help fix those currently, but if I ever land in one of these tiles and I have a card, I'm going to try to remember to actually fix this, as I don't want it to get out of control. So now we're moving over to the bounty hunter. I'm going to take a look at the trait card for Leica, as we're actually going to use our companion for the first time. I'm really excited for this, and hopefully it's going to set ourselves up for some exciting action here. So the card, or the trait for Leica, states each game turn. Now, game turn in Nemesis is defined as the entire player phase and entire event phase all wrapped into one. So in most games it's considered what we call a round, but in Nemesis they call it a game turn, which can be confusing. So on the trait card it states each game turn before performing your first action. So essentially, right after you go ahead and grab your 5 cards up for the bounty hunter, before you perform your first action, you can move Leica to a neighboring room or call her back. And when Leica is in the same room as a bounty hunter or as an intruder, when this comes around, automatically call her back. So in this case, Leica is currently on my board for the bounty hunter, and I actually want to send Leica out. The reason I want to is because on the trait card further down, it states when she is on the main board, she performs noise rolls as any other character, and then during the event phase, she is considered as the player on the left of the bounty hunter. And Leica ignores fire and is not attacked by intruders. So I can send her into situations that would otherwise be dangerous for my characters in order to cause noise rolls to actually bring out more intruders. Now, normally you'd think this is a bad thing, but I've kind of got a strategy here, and it's an interesting one. We learned that these guys are vulnerable to fire. We now have an intruder standing on the nest. The nest itself, with the eggs inside of it, of which there's 4 left on the top right there, including the intruder, are all vulnerable to fire. If we can trigger another intruder to land into the nest, which I'd like to do with Leica, I could potentially have a combo here between the bounty hunter and the medic of doing some big time damage to the individuals inside of that nest. It could be quite a bit of fun. Remember, my medic has Molotov cocktail and a grenade. I only have one card left with her, but the medic has combat drugs, which doesn't require anything but just the use of it alone to draw until you have 5 cards. So she would start with 5 cards, even though in this game turn, which she started, being the very first player, she already burnt 4 of her 5 cards. The combat drugs will ramp her right back up, and as long as she moved from where she's currently at to here, she'd be able to toss her flammable grenade. Of course, just a grenade that would obviously do damage in that room, but more importantly, the Molotov cocktail, which would actually cause the room to start on fire as well as do injuries, thereby hitting 2 different intruders that are in the nest, plus the nest on top of it. We don't even have an objective to take out the nest, but it'd be pretty awesome to take them all down at once, or at least do some big time damage to them. And every single time during the event phase, when we hit the fire damage step, if the nest is on fire from that Molotov cocktail, instead of just removing 1 egg every time because there's a vulnerability to fire, it's 2 eggs. So in 2 game turns, we will have destroyed the nest. That's pretty epic. So before I get going with my bounty hunter and his 2 actions, I'm going to send out Leica, and she's going to go from the fire control system over to this tile right here in the nest. That's right, but don't worry, because Leica can't be hurt by fire or by intruders, which is great. So she's currently in the nest right now, but Leica has to roll for noise because she's considered a character in that regard. So we're gonna go ahead and roll for noise for that movement into this location, and this is part of my plan to trigger something else in this area. So here we go. All right, so we got ourselves a 4, which is this one right here. So that is going to force this one, and this one back here to all disappear. So now we're going into the bag to determine which intruder is coming out as a result of Leica going in there making a lot of noise in the nest. We got ourselves a larva. So we have a larva inside the nest. That's not surprising at all. I'm really glad I didn't pull the queen. That would have been terrible. We do have the least of all of them in here, so that's kind of nice. A sigh of relief, a little bit less to worry about. The one thing to note on the trait card for Leica is it does state when Leica is in the same room as the bounty hunter or as an intruder, automatically call her back. And when you call her back automatically, she just removes herself and goes back to the bounty hunter board. So she did exactly what I needed her to do, and I didn't have to pay any cards to do it, which is even better. So at this point now I've got the opportunity to do 2 actions for my character. Now, my plan here is to have the medic come in and throw in some Molotovs and grenades and whatnot in order to try to take this thing down, at least to help with this current situation. The other thing with larvae that's really dangerous is you don't want to be in a room with one of those things, because when they attack, they latch onto your character board, and we already talked about how that can be bad. So we just want to take them out. They only need 1 injury to be removed, so they're not that bad, but when they're in there with an intruder, that certainly, or an adult I should say, that certainly makes things even more interesting. So for my first action here, I'm going to go ahead and actually search the fire control system that I'm currently in, because there is the availability to actually search 1 time. So I'm going to go ahead and use this card right here, discarding it, and we'll tick down that room to 0 so it's no longer searchable, and see what we find. Now this was a pretty good find. We found a fire extinguisher. Discard a fire marker from the room you're in, or use on 1 intruder in the room you're in, and it retreats. Oh, very interesting. That could be super useful. Oh, that's tough. And then on top of it, we got tools. And tools is one of the things we need to actually discard in order to gain Seek mode as a quest item on the bounty hunter, which will beef up Leica's abilities. That's pretty cool. And Seek mod is this one right here. If we open it up, it says you can play a search action card to perform it in the room Leica is in. Afterward, Leica returns to the bounty hunter's board. So that's pretty awesome. We just need to pay the certain amount of cards as noted and discard the tools to activate this. So that's really tempting as well, especially to get, you know, more items onto the bounty hunter. But the fire extinguisher would be really useful right now in this situation, because I could move in, say for instance, after the medic goes in and torches the place, and I could move in and cause the intruder, if it's not, or the adult intruder, to retreat if I wanted to. But I'm not 100% sure that's the best call. So I really think being that the tools can help me, and it's not also this, oh, I just noticed this is a heavy item. I would have to drop my character corpse I'm carrying or my gun. So that pretty much automatically forces me to go down the tools route. So let's go ahead and forget about the fire extinguisher, as cool as it sounds, and go with the tools. So now with those tools in hand on the bounty hunter, I'm going to go ahead and discard them. Not going to use them for anything on the card itself, because it states on seek mode, if I want to complete this quest, I have to discard the tools to activate this item, but I also have to pay a card, which I will do. So I will pay the interruption card. I don't plan on using that for anything else. And this will allow me to flip this quest item over, and now we have the seek mod on Leica. Coming back over to the medic, we only have a single card remaining, just the rest card. And as I mentioned, I wanted to actually attempt to draw up some cards here. Now you'll see that my discard pile is completely full. If I wanted to draw up some cards, I could use these combat drugs here. This would allow me to right now drop until I have 5 cards, which will give me what I need in order to actually go over and throw these grenades and Molotov cocktails and everything else, plus explore a tile we need to, or a room I should say, that we need to cover for our goal anyway. So I'm going to use this moment to do this right now. We're going to discard this, draw into you 5 cards. Let's do exactly that. But first, we need to shuffle this deck, flip it over here. All right, we're all shuffled up. Let's go through 4 cards and see what we get. First one off the top is repairs. The next one is a search card. Next one up, interruption. And finally, pharmacist. All right, here we go. We're gonna have the medic head down into this unexplored tile right here, as there's no noise surrounding it anywhere in any of the corridors 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm just gonna do a regular movement. I thought about doing a careful movement here, but I wanna keep some of the cards in my hand. I like the search card. I like the ability that I have the repairs card for the engine if I happen to be able to get into there and be able to check it. I also have this other plan in the back of my head where I might just say the heck with the engines. I already got one working, and just do a gamble as to one of the 2 other ones working. Yeah, that's right, I'm that crazy. If things get stressful and I need to keep moving towards my objective, I might risk that. I've also got the escape pod as a backup plan. Of course, they have to be activated in order to use it. It's currently locked right now. That's a whole other issue. But for right now, let's just find out if this happens to be the surgery room. That would be really handy. Plus, I can do some long, nice throws into this room to try and take these guys out and help the bounty hunter get to the surgery room if this is in fact it. If it's not here, it's got to be over here. So we'll see soon enough regardless. So let's move that medic down. And look what we found. We found the surgery room. This is actually kind of weird because all the green tiles are straight down the middle, although they don't connect in an easy way to get to them. But that's pretty wild. Anyway, the surgery room is what we found. It has 3 searchable objects inside this room, so that's awesome. I do have a search card that I can use. The other thing on this exploration token mentions that there is going to be a door involved, and that door is going to land in the corridor by which we came into this room, so that's going to be right behind me. So we've sealed off another area on that side of the ship. I guess it's not that bad, being that now we're on the side with the surgery room, so that actually worked out pretty good, and we sealed out most of the noise on the opposite side, plus we cleared what was on this side of the door. So for my second action with the medic, I'm going to go ahead and discard a card called Pharmacist, as I don't plan on taking any wounds anytime soon, in order to use the Molotov cocktail. This one right here. This might be mass overkill, and it probably is, but I think it would be a lot of fun to try to burn up the nest at the same time. Again, I don't have an objective that makes me need to do this, except for the simple fact that I want to. So a Molotov cocktail is thrown into the room, as it states on the card itself. We are targeting an intruder in that room. However, every being in that room, that would include characters if there were any in there, and also is going to include that larva, are going to take 1 injury / serious wound. So in this case, it's an injury being that we're dealing with the intruders. So first off, the larva can only handle 1 injury. So it's already incinerated from the fire itself. So that thing has been melted away. The intruder adult that we have in there, however, takes 1 damage. So I'm going to go ahead and just place 1 cube on this token right here. Now, the one thing I need to do at this point is make a noise roll. You might be wondering, wait, why are you doing a noise roll? Well, it's because I chose to throw a Molotov cocktail into a nest. Yes, when trying to destroy the nest, even if that's not your intention, it was actually just to go ahead and attack the intruders in the room. It is the nest tile, so when you throw a grenade or throw a Molotov cocktail in there, you are affecting the actual eggs as well. So when I went ahead and threw a Molotov cocktail in here, not only did I take out the larva, I also actually take out 1 egg off the intruder board, plus we put the extra damage on the adult intruder. That will wrap it all up. We have 4 eggs on the intruder board. It's going to go down to 3. You also might think that based on the vulnerability to fire, that right now that vulnerability would come into play, but the card states that when an intruder suffers an injury from fire, it suffers an additional injury. Now, the interesting thing is, technically, based on the Molotov cocktail, thematically, it would definitely be suffering from fire, but it doesn't actually state this. It just states to place a fire marker in this room, as in a fire has basically started because of this Molotov cocktail. When we get to the fire damage section of the event phase, that's when the fire damage will trigger and will place more damage than normal on everything inside that room. So as I mentioned, I'll first go ahead and remove 1 of the 4 eggs. I highly doubt the queen is going to be happy about that. And now we perform a noise roll because of the Molotov cocktail and the fact I threw it into the nest. Now, you might also be wondering, well, where does the noise result resolve? Does it resolve around the nest, or does it resolve around the surgery room from where I threw the Molotov cocktail? And it is, based on the FAQ, the surgery room. So we're going to go ahead right now and roll, and let's see where it lands. Oh, we got ourselves an X. So once again, we're right back to our luck. I don't understand it. This must be the die that had helped me out so much in the last one. I'm going to continue to use this thing forever. You may have noticed that I had an exploration token sitting face up as we had resolved it earlier for the surgery room, and it was sitting on the surgery tile actually in the last shot. I just removed that because we already resolved it. So in terms of the bounty hunter now with 2 actions, I could go into the nest and go toe-to-toe with this thing with the cards that I have to try to take it down, but it only has 1 injury on it right now, and I have to work my way up to at least 3 or 4 probably to feel comfortable pulling that intruder attack card to determine whether I take it down. I'm not really comfortable with that, plus there's fire in there which could hurt me if I get stuck in there, plus I'm in a room with an intruder. There's just no reason to dive in there unless the intruder happens to come towards me. So I'm at this point or at least in terms of the bounty hunter, going to go ahead and pass. I'm also going to go ahead and discard this Go Girl card in order to lower the amount of cards in my hand for the next player phase, so that I'm able to go ahead and draw up hopefully cards that will revolve around actually fixing or getting rid of these broken rooms, because remember, we have 5 of them right now that are malfunctioning, and I'd like to remove that. So now I'm down to just 2 cards. I'll be able to draw up 3 later on, but now we go back to the medic. Now, one thing I forgot to do, and I should have done this the second I placed the injury marker on the alien, but there's no gameplay impact even though I forgot to do it at the right timing, but I'm supposed to go ahead and flip an intruder attack card to determine what the intruder does, because that actually could have had an impact on where the intruder went for what I want to do as the bounty hunter when it was his turn. So let's go ahead and flip that card now. Hopefully it doesn't have any impact. We'll see. That was a silly miss on my part, but there was a lot going on there. So let's go ahead and flip it over, see what would happen. So in this case, oh, it's a 2. That would have been so nice, but we're not close enough to be able to actually take it out just yet. So that was pretty brutal, because I believe that is the lowest value that could have come up from the intruder deck is a 2. 2, so which means if we had used our grenade instead of the Molotov cocktail, we would have put 2 damage on this thing and killed it just then. But we wouldn't have known that, and the odds of that happening, well, the way things have been going, luck has been on my side, but this time, not so much. All right, so we're back to the medic. We already know we've passed with the bounty hunter, so really we're just going to do as many actions with the medic at this point as we possibly want to do or can do, and then we will move to the event phase. So I've talked multiple times about what I want to do with the medic, and I've flip-flopped on what I want to do because things keep changing so crazily. We have an alien or intruder which is just south of us, so it really could happen in the event phase that he comes up to the surgery room and causes me all kinds of grief. I don't really want to be there if that's the case, so I'd rather get out of there to avoid combat with him, and or maybe search the surgery room first, seeing as there are 3 searchable times I could do so there, and then maybe duck into the engine room and check it just to be certain we can keep the ship alive, right? Might be worth it. Plus, I do have the repairs card in hand right now, so this might be the time to use it. The downside is I'd have to, if I want to do all of that, burn a card called Rest, which I'm trying to eventually hold on to use my contamination card, but maybe we'll just wait for that for later. So with all that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by discarding this card right here. This is Search, and it's going to allow me to search in this room, dropping it from 3 to 2. We'll take a look at 2 green items and pick one. All right, so we pulled 2 items out of the deck. Both of these would be half of what we need to build another Molotov cocktail. So you can see that by the icons exact same in the top left-hand corner. These also carry the same ability on both cards, but then they also have a different one for each. So the differences here was with the close, one-time use, you can discard it to get rid of a slime marker. That's kind of helpful, although I don't have one yet, but I could eventually find a room, say, that has an exploration token that says you get slimed, so this would allow me to get rid of that. Or we take bandages, which gives me the opportunity to bounce between whether I want to get rid of serious wounds or light wounds. I'd like to avoid the possibility of ever getting a serious wound, right? It's just not a good thing, so I might actually go with the bandages. So I did, in fact, go with the bandages. I also ticked down the surgery room from 3 to 2, and now I'm going to move into the engine room. I'm going to use the Rest card that I have here in order to discard this, do a regular movement into that room, as I'm not concerned, although I kind of should be concerned. I could actually pull an intruder here because you can see there is a blue technical corridor connecting right there to this room, which means, yep, if I roll a 2, we could have a friend join us. But for me, this risk is worth it because I think we do need to make sure that the ship is going to be okay, because it will give us another option in terms of surviving in the hibernatorium, as long as we make sure we're going to the right destination, which we'll have to get to the cockpit of the ship in order to determine that on the complete opposite side. But anyway, noise roll. Let's see how this goes. 2, and we have literally just triggered an intruder in the engine room number 2. Well, this is really, really bad. I pretty much just talked that right into existence, so I'm gonna go ahead here, we'll shuffle this bag up, we'll dig inside it, we're gonna pull one out and find out what we get. I'm also going to remove the noise marker from this technical corridor because it triggered in the technical corridor. We got a 2, would have put 2 here, so both of them would be removed at this point. So that's nice, right? Clears us up for other areas, but not so much right now. Maybe it was a good idea I did grab the bandages kind of with this happening, so let's see. Ugh, this better not be bad. All right, we got ourselves a larva. That's actually not terrible. And if you see, it has a warning 1, and oh my gosh, we are super lucky I got that repairs card still in my hand, so there won't be any surprise attack happening. So we just got super lucky because we just barely met the surprise attack limit there to keep that from happening. If a surprise attack happens with a larva, they attach to you, they come off of the board, and they go on your character board, as I mentioned earlier. On top of that, you take a contamination card and add it to your discard pile at the top. That wouldn't have been good. We already have one on the medic. We would have had 2. And then, of course, you got to try to surgically remove the thing to avoid that thing causing you grief later on. Thankfully, surgery is right next to us, so if it needs to happen, we have that ability. That usually does not work out like that. But at this point in time, this thing's not attacking us. Thankfully, we have 1 card left, and I have to decide how I want to handle this thing. If I don't handle it when the intruders attack, it will latch onto me during the event phase. So even though I would love to repair that engine, I'm not going to be able to at this point. I need to get rid of that thing. So I'm going to have to do a melee attack against it, which isn't so bad because the odds are in my favor when you're attacking a larva that you'll be okay. It's much worse trying to melee melee attack something larger. So we'll give this a shot, see if it works. I can still goof this up though and actually not make it happen. So we'll put that repairs card in. This allows me to make that melee attack. We'll take 1 red die and we're going to roll it, cross our fingers, and hope we can get rid of this thing. All right, we got the 1 hit that we need. And what's really huge about this hit is not only does it remove this larva from the board, which I'm definitely going to do right now, we also don't take any type of serious wounds or anything like that. At a high level, I'll just say these two sides of the dice are the best sides to get when making an attack in general. If you get these other ones, well, things just either don't work out for you or they do work out for you, but you'll end up taking some wounds, sometimes even a serious wound, especially when you're dealing with melee combat. And at this point, I can't do any further actions. I have no more cards in my hand. I think we're going to stop. This was quite the turn, so a pass here for the medic, and we're moving into the event phase. First thing that's happening in the event phase is time is ticking down to 10. Next, intruders that are in combat with a character would attack. None of my characters are thankfully in any rooms with any intruders, so that's good news. Now we move to fire damage, and as I talked about before, right now, this adult intruder is in a room with fire, so 1 additional damage for sure hitting it, and in addition, thanks to the fire vulnerability, another damage is going to be placed as well at the same time, because that vulnerability states that when you get 1, you're going to take another. And just to further clarify, it's not just taking 1 fire damage that triggers that additional 1, it's just taking any fire damage in general will cause them to take an additional damage or injury. So at this point, there's a total of 3, and now we're going to pull a card from the intruder attack deck to see whether or not that's enough fire damage to take out this intruder. Here's hoping. Not so much. We got ourselves a 5, so this thing is still ticking. Fire damage inside the nest is also going to hit an egg, and because vulnerability to fire, an additional egg will be taken off as well. So we're down to just 1 egg left inside the nest, and once this egg eventually goes, then we'll be placing a red marker on the nest to denote that it's been destroyed. Moving right along to the event card, you can see here at the very top left, we've got breeder and the queen symbol. Those would both be moving down the number 1 corridor if we had them on the board, but we don't. We move down to the bottom portion, which I'm really not looking forward to. It says regeneration. Each intruder on the board heals 2 injuries. So all that work that we put into actually doing damage to this thing, it's still alive, and it's even doing better than before. So that is extremely unfortunate. We're going to go ahead and take away 2 of those injury markers right now. Well, that's certainly rough and throws a wrench into my plans. Now let's go to the intruder bag development step. Let's pull out a token from the bag. Oh no, that is not good. Let's see what the queen has in store for us. However, there's nothing to fear here. This is actually quite good for us, because what happens is, as long as there's no characters in the nest when the queen token is drawn, the queen is not showing up. It will only show up if one of my characters had been in there. So thank goodness I didn't move the bounty hunter in there. That would have been terrible. Good call on that front. But what does happen is another egg is generated in the nest in this particular case. So that egg up in there in the top right hand corner is going to see another egg joining it, but remember, we have that whole vulnerability to fire thing going on, so every time the nest takes damage, it's taking 2 damage. So really this was a perfect pull out of the bag, because it really isn't going to change much. This nest is still going to burn down. An additional egg has been added to the nest. That is going to end the current event phase. And just for clarity's sake, in terms of if you're wondering what I did with the actual queen token when I pulled it out of the bag as part of the intruder development bag step, it went right back inside the bag after I added the egg. So the medic currently has absolutely no cards in her hand going into this player phase, so 5 cards going in. Let's see what we get. First off here, we have a search card. I doubt I'll be doing much searching. I want to get going. The contamination card has finally made its way back around into my hand. This is going to cause me some grief, because I can't use this to spend for any actions, and I can't obviously use it for any abilities because there are none on the card. So it's going to be in my hand until I can try to wrest this away or deal with it with other game mechanics, which I'll certainly be trying to do later on. Demolition is the 3rd card. Computer skills, the 4th. And finally, we have ER. So these are the two cards I still have in my hand. I'm happy with them. One helps me in surprise attack situations, and as I get going on the move here, that'll be helpful. Taking aim, I'm probably going to use right away, finally, because this intruder just does not want to go down, and I need to make sure I make good rolls when I'm using my rifle 247 on it in the very near future. So we'll drop 3 more cards to add to these. We got ourselves some repairs. That's always good, because remember, we're trying to repair those rooms that are malfunctioning, so that might be something to do. Resting isn't really a big priority right now for me. I don't have any damage. And then Go Girl. That's always a good one, because I can really make use of my companion. And that's going to conclude part number 3 of the Nemesis playthrough here on the channel. I really hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm having a lot of fun trying to survive against this game. It constantly throws wrenches into your plans. You might have heard me talk strategy throughout this multiple times and then do something polar opposite, and that's just because the nature of the game, with noise, intruders, and everything else going around about the objectives we need to complete, the cards we have in hand, really cause you to constantly keep shifting your thoughts as to what you need to do next. What might be a plan 5 minutes ago is not always the best plan later on. You can see we're actually attempting to try to go to the engine number 2 with the medic and check it out, whereas I was thinking of ditching that plan during the video as well. So I went back and forth a number of times, and again, doors being sealed, different locations appearing at different spots than I maybe anticipated them showing up. All these things threw wrenches into the plan. But either way, it's a fun game. I am enjoying it. Really hope you're enjoying watching it. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.